Thank you very much. Thank you, Lukas Mandl and the Brussels International Center, Marc Otte, for hosting this event and for inviting me. It's really a great initiative to have this discussion so early on in this geopolitical commission, but I'm afraid we're already a little bit too late. If I look at the title of the event, Avoiding Multi-State Conflict, as we've just heard, we are in the middle of it. We just have to look around. Syria is not just a civil war. We have Iran, Russia, now Turkey, occasionally Israel involved. We have a war in Yemen, where Saudi Arabia and Iran are involved. We have Hezbollah in Lebanon, and an ongoing conflict that sometimes can turn hot between Hezbollah-controlled Lebanon and Israel. We have, of course, the ongoing conflict between Hamas-controlled Gaza. Before I continue, maybe I want to really salute Paula. It is very. It's one thing to sit here in the comfortable, air-conditioned rooms of the European Parliament and to talk about human rights and Hezbollah in Lebanon, but to sit in Beirut and to specifically point out at these entities takes a lot of courage, and I can only salute them. So what I would plead to the European Commission, to the External Action Service, to the EU, is to really have an evidence-based review of what is the problem in the Middle East, what has worked so far, and what doesn't work. As we have just gone through the various conflicts, and as we've heard from previous speakers, there is a common thread here, and that is Iran. And I don't think that European policymakers have really understood the nature of the Iranian regime. And the nature of the Iranian regime is that it's a revolutionary regime. It is not just enough for it to control and oppress its own people. It is bent on spreading its revolutionary ideology, and it's bent on controlling the region. We are seeing this, in Syria, where without doubt, without Iranian involvement, the Assad regime would have probably fallen. This has direct implications for Europe. The refugee wave would have most likely not occurred, certainly not in these dimensions, had it not been for Iran. It is also Iran that is rearming Hezbollah in Lebanon, and we've heard controlling Lebanon in violation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which was also a European, or specifically a French project. And is possibly triggering perhaps another war with Israel. In Iraq, we haven't touched really on Iraq, but again, we have seen the riots in Iraq, which are very much like in Lebanon and Iran, riots against what is seen as Iranian meddling, corruption, and oppression, and so forth. And it's very difficult to imagine, apart from all the problems we have between Israelis and Palestinians, and there are many obstacles to finding peace between the two that are simply Israeli and Palestinian obstacles, but it's difficult to imagine ever there being peace as long as Iran can continue to play the spoiler by supporting Hamas, and as we have seen now, particularly Islamic Jihad. So an evidence-based analysis would lead one inevitably to conclude, if one wants to contain the wars and maybe prevent future one has to find a policy to contain Iran. Unfortunately, I believe that the Europeans have tied their hands when it comes to Iran, and primarily as a result of the JCPOA. I very much disagree with the consensus in Europe, and probably also on this podium. The deal is a very flawed deal. We can spend hours discussing its many flaws. The fundamental flaw is that its most important restrictions come with an expiration date, the so-called sunset clause. And as one Israeli general told us recently, after sunset comes darkness. When the JCPOA was implemented, the deadlines for the various restrictions that would fall away were 10 to 15 years. We are, however, now in year 5 of implementation. So the various restrictions will now fall away between 5 and 10 years. Other non-nuclear related restrictions that are part of the UN resolution that endorsed it will fall away even sooner. Next year, the arms embargo against Iran will fall away, and they can buy Russian, Chinese advanced weapons. This means that Iran doesn't have to violate the deal in order to become a nuclear threshold state. It can simply implement it patiently. And which is why, at the end, when the sunset clauses are all fall away, or the restrictions fall away, Iran will be a nuclear threshold state, and with a breakout time, which is the time it would need to produce enough fissile material for nuclear weapons, of near zero. This is a statement that doesn't come from President Trump or Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. This is a statement from President Obama, who negotiated the deal, and you can look it up in an NPR interview in 2015. It's basic physics. It's a reality. These are facts. So the Iran nuclear deal doesn't really prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear power. It's also not a non-proliferation agreement, because every actor in the region disagrees with the European assessment, clearly sees the danger of a nuclear threshold state, of an Iranian nuclear threshold state, and it is getting ready for it. The Saudis are basically, as is more or less known, in a position to buy possibly nuclear weapons off the shelf from Pakistan. Turkey is talking about nuclear weapons, Egypt, and so forth. So we will, at the very least, also see a nuclear arms race as a result of which. But Europeans often say, well, you know, this is a nuclear deal and it has nothing to do with the Iranian aggression in the region. We should deal with it separately. But however, these two things are linked, because the very logic of the deal demands that Iran must profit economically from it. And so Europe has and continues to do its utmost so that Iran will profit economically from the deal. Of course, a lot of has changed as a result of the reimposition of US sanctions. And in order to deepen economic activity between Iran and Europe, you also need deepening diplomatic relations. So we have seen a series of commissioners and foreign ministers and trade delegations from Europe coming to Iran. So when I discuss with European diplomats who usually agree, yes, Iran is a problem in the region, and we are ready to help Americans and Israel to contain Iran, and then I ask them, what are you ready to do? What can we do? There usually is a lot of silence, because the most important tools, economic pressure or diplomatic pressure, are more or less off the table, because Europe is determined to keep the very flawed, in my view, JCPOA deal in place. So these two things are ultimately linked, and of course, as a result of the JCPOA, Iran was flushed with money, which, as we have heard now from Lebanon, as we've heard from our colleague from Paris, wasn't used to build hospitals and schools, as we were told, but to a large degree ended up in the pockets of the IRGC, and otherwise was used for, and I'll wrap it up in a second, was used to fund proxies from Hezbollah to those Iraqi troops. So, in my view, Europe needs to really have a policy of containment for Iran, and it needs to have a policy of containment also for against its proxies, primarily Hezbollah. Here is an opportunity to actually prevent a war, another war between Israel and Hezbollah, which has been armed to the teeth, up to 150,000 missiles by Iran, many of them guided missiles, which means that if, and some will say when, there will be another war, it will make the last confrontation, which was bad and tragic enough, look like child's play. The Hezbollah missiles will overwhelm Israeli missiles defense system, and it will lead to great devastation. So I would suggest something like preemptive, a European preemptive strike, not a preemptive military strike, but a preemptive diplomatic strike, by clearly condemning what Europe should do anyway, Iran and Hezbollah violation of 1701, by clearly condemning Hezbollah's ongoing human rights violations and war crimes, because it is hiding the missiles among its civilian Lebanese population, and by finally putting also the so-called military arm of Hezbollah on the terror list to put Hezbollah on notice that it will be held responsible for any future confrontation. Thank you.